Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Rike Alien for the newest version of it. Obviously, the Rike Alien, I know this is real striking, so it's for some people it's going to be hard to pay attention to what I'm about to say because this is a really wild knife. This knife has been around for a bit. The Alien knife has been around for a long time. Rike has done it before. This is the newest version. First and foremost, a lot of people look at the titanium frame and say that has to be cast. I have confirmed it is not cast. It is actually milled, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. A lot of people say, so what? It's milled. It's done by a machine. Yeah, we don't see this type of intricate milling on an everyday basis. This is pretty special stuff. This is a super high quality, very intricate, functional piece, right? Definitely leaning much more in the way of art than tool, but still plenty durable and plenty capable as a titanium frame lock. The blade steel, you can see right here, it says Damascus Steel in cursive. Sorry, you can see me a little bit there. That's interesting. We're going to talk about that because that's a beautiful blade, but is it Damascus Steel? Thank you so much to Rike for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. Can you still buy this? I don't know. I don't exist to sell things. I link things in my description. If there's a place where I think they might pop up or where they have been in the past, I'm going to do that. But the purpose of this video is not to sell this thing. Rike did send me this to showcase it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to review it and talk about it, right? But whether or not it's available, I have no idea. So I'll link some places down in the description where you might see it. It came, if you do manage to get this brand new, it comes with well, you could call this a multi-tool slash attitude adjuster, right? It's a bottle opener and glass breaker and whatever you want to use that for. But it unscrews and it's a little bit driver, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, the same type of intricate milling is applied to this thing as well. Really neat. And it looks like it's actually got a little tritium slot there. I like that. That's a lot of stuff. Even though these are made in China, if you compare apples to apples, like for the materials used, again, we're going to cover that blade here in a second, but $379, I was pretty shocked, especially with the label of Damascus Steel on there. Let's go ahead and measure this thing. The overall length of the Alien 4 is coming in at 9 inches. Wow. Blade length, I guess we're going to call it 4 inches. The cutting edge is about 3.75. Let's do some quick size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. So up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. It's a pretty long knife. It's not a massive, robust knife, but it's definitely on the long side. Up against the PM2, whoops-a-daisy, and the Spyderco Para 3. Yeah, it's still big. And then finally, the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Hogue Deca. How is the action on this knife? Good Lord, it is beautiful. Rike is, in terms of production knife companies out there, there are certain companies where their ability to machine materials like titanium is like a level or two above everybody else. I would include Riat in this. I would include Maxace in this. Certainly Rike. There are plenty of companies that are capable of really, really intricate machining. We Knives has actually showcased some amazing machining here, specifically pointing out knives like the GTC Solid collab. Really, really impressive, but wow, what the heck here? And on top of that, the flipper tab and the action is superb. This is going to do nothing but get smoother over time. It is plenty easy to manipulate. Not a lot of room to get in here. You're pretty much dedicated to the flipper. This does run on bearings, by the way. But the action and detent are really, really good. The action is so nice. You look at something like this and think pure art or pure gas station knife. Huge difference between a cheap piece of crap and something that was actually made with love and care, right? An intention to bring something ultra high quality to the knife market, even if it does take on the appearance of something from a fantasy game or movie, right? Specifically Alien. I think that was probably the motivation there. But yeah, action good is ultimately what I'm saying. Carry profile, if you're actually going to carry this, which, at the price point, definitely there will be people, if you're new to the knife world and you're like, oh my gosh, this knife's almost $400. Nobody's ever going to carry that, right? Wrong. Welcome to the knife community. No, there's tons of people. Tons of people. It's kind of hard to get to that point where you're like okay with carrying a knife that costs that much. But once you figure out exactly how common it is for a knife to cost this much money, you realize that, there are people who start collecting them and eventually they start carrying them. And it's, everybody's a little bit different. And I think if you never get to the point where you're comfortable carrying a knife like that or owning a knife like that, I think that's perfectly fine. But don't assume that there are not people who will carry them, because there absolutely are. Absolutely. Knives get way more expensive than this. The community's been around for literally decades. So this is not a new thing. But yeah, at this price point, people will carry this. So let's do carry profile. There we go, up against the Para 3 for thickness. Is not super thick. Obviously, a lot of contouring here, a lot of shaping. So that's nice. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Yeah, it's a little longer than the PM2, and it's curved. So you could say height-wise, this is going to be a little bit of a weirdy-beardy in the pocket. I don't know why I said that. But yeah, it's curved. It's going to be kind of strange, but then again, it's not really that heavy of an object. For materials, obviously a ton of titanium, including this very intricate and interesting housing for the blade. What does this do in terms of utility for the blade? Nothing. What's the point of it? Nothing. Embellishment. This is the whole theme here. I think for some reason, there's always people confused about the idea of over-embellishment on a pocket knife. This is not a new theme. Art or extra embellishment has existed in the world of pocket knives for, hundreds, maybe thousands of years, right? However long folding knives have existed, somebody has sought to dress it up a little bit with something that does not equate perfectly to utility. So this is not a new thing. It shouldn't be that hard to wrap your head around. But the point of that is 100%. It's not like you can, it's like replaceable Damascus Steel blades. No, it comes with one blade, right? It is 100% just like, hey, look at this weird thing that we did, right? Which is perfectly okay. I think that's fine. Doesn't have to be for everybody. Let's go ahead and weigh it. I bet you this comes in slightly under or slightly over 4 ounces. Yeah, 3.6 ounces. So it's really not a super heavy object. In fact, it's pretty incredible. Perfect ratios almost, considering how much blade and cutting edge you're getting. And then we definitely need to check the blade stock thickness here. Obviously, if you're going to cut with this, there are areas where you'd have to push the blade and this housing through what you're cutting, which would make it horribly inconvenient. But the blade stock thickness itself is actually super thin, 75,000. So if you dedicate to just this area up here, right, will it slice efficiently? I'm going to pull it out. It's kind of an awkward... These are pretty thin pieces of paper, right? Oh, boy, beautiful. I understand this is just paper, but this was a purposeful edge. They definitely wanted to sharpen it properly, and it is razor sharp. But if you try to break down a thick cardboard box with it, right, choking up and pushing it straight down, you got to push this whole weird lumpy thing through, cardboard. So, again... They clearly, if you've looked at other knives that Rike and Quechua have produced, they know how to make a practical blade. They said, for this one, obviously a long time ago when they designed it, we're going to make it designy, right? And kind of push the practical stuff off to the side, just for fun. That's okay. But let's see here. Hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommended. We can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools, I use on this channel. So you can take this apart completely if you want to, and it's actually pretty simple. It looks like a super complex knife, but no, it's not. It's just a regular frame lock running on bearings. So the pivot is going to be a T8, and then we have a bunch of T6 screws. Not really, actually. This is not an integral. It's actually seamed, which is cool. It really looks like an integral. They've hidden all the hardware on this side, which is really, really cool. The presentation of this is just amazing. And even on the sides with the fasteners, not a lot going on here. They've hidden the screw for the pocket clip. No lefty position. Sorry, lefties. But it's just one long screw, or 2 long screws going all the way through, and then you've got your pivot, and you've got your steel lock bar insert, right? You've got the blade housing. I guess if you want to take the blade out of that, you don't have to. But anyways, as long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. That's pretty much it. So let's talk about a few different things here. Number one, is it actually comfortable to hang on to? Yes, it actually is. It's really funny because it just looks like there's no way that this is going to be comfortable. It is. I think, if you really were to take this out and use it, you'd be okay for a bit, right? But there's just, obviously, there's so many better things to use. But it's just funny how comfortable it is. A nice little choke-up spot. I normally don't like this Persian curvature, but it really adds to the wildness of this design overall. And if you want to know personally, do I like this? I love this. I am a collector of many different types of knives. You guys have probably seen my collection. And, I think anytime somebody tries to pin down specifically my taste, they'll see a knife in my collection that seems to not belong there at all. And this would be one of those knives. I like to collect practical, inexpensive knives, and I like to collect things that are not practical at all and wildly expensive, right? It's not necessarily about any one thing. It's just, does it stand out for one reason or another? And this does. There is nothing else in my collection that is exactly like this. This is one of the most unique things that I own now. And I do think it's really, really cool. Something that I think is neat, and it's just neat. It's, like I said, it's completely and totally unnecessary. This housing for the blade is titanium, right? So typically what we have with a lock bar, in this case, a titanium lock bar, in order to increase the life of the lock, because the blade is steel, definitely. It's definitely steel. If you have just titanium rubbing against the steel, right, for the lock, then that lock bar wears down a little faster. Not crazy, right? Still, a lot of people gotten over a decade of use out of their titanium frame locks. They started putting steel lock bar inserts for two reasons. Number one, it slows the wear down for each engagement. Number two, if there is an issue with lockup, it's much easier to replace a single steel chip that's just sort of nested into the lock bar there. Than it is to replace the entire lock bar. But you would say, now, wait a second. Isn't it engaging? So this is backwards then, because what the blade's attached to is titanium. So now you have a titanium lock bar with a steel lock bar insert, but that steel lock bar insert is contacting titanium. Actually, it's contacting steel. As you can see here, they have an insert on the blade for two reasons. Number one, it's so that the steel lock bar insert is contacting steel on the thing that houses the blade. So you have titanium lock bar, steel lock bar insert, contacting steel lock bar insert on the housing, contacting or mounted on a titanium frame, which the steel blade is mounted to. This also means that, I was going to say the bearings are right on. There's probably a steel washer in there that the bearings are riding on, but the pivot structure and everything is attached to a piece of steel, right? The pivot itself is going through like this steel mount thing that's on the inside. So I guess it's just so many silly, crazy. They clearly were like, who cares at this point, right? I've literally never seen that before. The way that it benefits the knife, or it's like a lot of these little things that knife makers do are meant to benefit it, but there's so many extra layers here that we've kind of pulled away from the entire idea, and it's kind of just humorous at this point. It is impressive though, even if it amounts to nothing. It's pretty impressive, and I've never seen it before. So the original design is Richard Wu. I believe that's the founder of Rike. Now this is a beautiful blade, right? Damascus Steel, if you didn't know, is not people mispronouncing Damascus. And when I say Damascus, if you're new and you want to, let's say like yesterday, you just discovered that Woots and the whole history of Woots is lost to time. And this interesting subject is clearly lost on these poor peasants of the knife community who don't know the difference. We know. Please hold that. Just keep us from rubbing our temples. Modern Damascus, technically, is probably somewhat this or that, whatever. Modern Damascus is factually superior. Like the way that it's created is obviously not exactly, maybe the same way as in the past. But in terms of potential performance, it is superior. Make no mistake. There's no like magical secret sauce that we can't figure out in terms of performance. No, we've made it better, whether the process is the same or not. But what I'm discussing here has nothing to do with Woots, right? Damascus Steel is not a mispronunciation of Damascus. No, that's actually a company called Damascus Steel. They make their own proprietary powder-formed performance Damascus, and they call it Damascus Steel. This is much more expensive stuff than what you might find on Amazon, which is just two random compositions pounded together or pattern welded together. This is Damascus Steel, I believe, is still pattern welded, but the compositions are PMC 27 and RWL 34. So what you end up with is a blade material that is not only performance oriented, very similar to CPM 154 in terms of balance, but it also can take an amazing finish. So you get these beautiful, you know, like when you acid etch it or whatever, you polish it, you get this beautiful contrast and shininess. And typically the patterns that come from the Damascus Steel company are very crisp and clean. And, you know, people who are spending a lot of money on knives and they start to care more about, you know, the embellishment, the work that goes into it and the materials used rather than how it equates to utility, they like stuff like this because not only is it beautiful to look at, but it is able to perform really, really well, and it's not a mystery. It's very controlled, right? This is a specific thing. It's not, you can't just say Damascus Steel and it's like any Damascus. It's not like a fax machine or Kleenex, right? Damascus Steel is Damascus Steel. It is very specifically that. So I looked at this and thought, oh boy, that is beautiful. I bet that really is Damascus Steel, right? So I reached out to Rike Alien, and I said, you have the word Damascus Steel on that blade. Is that actually Damascus Steel? And they responded and said, we should not call it that. That is not what it is. However, the process of creating this is, can't remember if they said similar or identical to Damascus Steel. It's very performance oriented, and they even claimed that it should, in some way, it was non-specific, some way outlast it or be more resilient. I mean, I'm unclear exactly how it would outperform Damascus Steel. But the composition itself, exactly what it is apparently kind of secretive. Okay, that's fine. But you guys can't call it Damascus Steel if it's not Damascus Steel. You can't say that it is. Because if it's like that's a company with like that's what they call their stuff is Damascus Steel. So it's perfectly okay if you guys have your own special sauce, and like if you can make something that is like let's say we find, I'm not saying I know what this is because I have no idea what it actually is. Maybe it really is exotic or semi-exotic powder form compositions, and the way that it's forged is similar or identical to Damascus Steel. And maybe it really is better in terms of edge retention or toughness or overall balance or whatever, right? There's a million different, that's a multi-directional teeter-totter. Better, right? It's circumstantial. It definitely depends on what it's being used for in the environment, all of that. Let's say you have that and you're able to deliver it on a, you know, in this form for what this ended up being $379. That would be amazing. That'd be great, right? Now, I would prefer that you disclose the compositions. This is something that everyone in the knife community has always said, like, don't just say Damascus. Tell us what it is. We're not impressed by Damascus, right? People who just stumbled in out of, you know, the last thing they watched was something on Cocomelon, and they stumbled into the knife world out of nowhere, and yeah, then they'll be super impressed by the word Damascus, right? Oh, I've heard that's special stuff. That's not going to impress, you know, your average long-term knife enthusiast. We want to know what the composition is, even if it's on something like this that is more art than it is functional, right? We still want to know. So we'd like to know what the composition is, but primarily you can't call it Damascus Steel. That's definitely not, I don't think that that's okay. I like Rike knives. I like the stuff that they do. I think they make some of the most interesting stuff on the market, right? So I'm a huge fan. I'm not trying to like create any trouble for them. But this is the type of thing that people don't like to see. We don't like to be led to think one thing and then find out that it's another, right? So Do I feel like this was intentional deception? I mean, like, they were perfectly willing to give this information up to me. I was like, is this actually Damascus? And they're like, no. It's a similar process, but we shouldn't call it that. So they know they shouldn't call it that. So don't put that on there. Like, if you're using Damascus Steel, if you're buying Damascus Steel from the Damascus Steel company and then you're turning it into a blade, then yeah, you can call it Damascus Steel, right? But if it's just your own version, then you got to come up with your own name for it, and you should explain to people what it is, and you should show some type of testing. You know, if it's going to perform a specific way, then there's got to be testing and things like that to back it up. Now, we have some incredible members of the community that are more than capable of figuring this out. I am not one of them. I am a design reviewer. I like to showcase things like this on this channel, right? I still think either way that this is an absolutely incredible piece, and I have no doubt that what this blade is made of is something pretty special, right? But I still want to know what it is. I don't think Laren Thomas is going to go out of his way to like specifically dissect this. But we do have, we have other people, you know, who can like thoroughly test this stuff in really scientific ways. So I think it would be better if Rike came out and told us exactly what it was and exactly what it's capable of based on their own testing. And then people can do their own testing and see if that lines up, right? But moving forward, if you guys have other projects with this steel, don't call it Damascus Steel. Come up with your own name and list it that way, right? If it's some sort of secretive composition that's proprietary and you guys like created it, all right, it still would be nice to know, right? But don't call it Damascus Steel. And if you're looking for, you know, if you're looking at Rike products and things like that, right? There are other blade materials that they use, like their M390, as far as I know, like that's legitimate M390, right? But if it says Damascus Steel on it, I would be a little bit wary, right? Maybe it actually is better, but it's apparently not actually Damascus Steel. And if you guys do decide to use Damascus Steel in the future, it makes it really hard to trust if it actually is, right? So, yeah, this is really, really neat. I believe that they are sold out everywhere. Maybe they're still floating around out there. If you decide to buy it, great. I think you'll really love it. But it was important for me as a channel who covers stuff like this to point that out, that they, you know, that it's not actually from the Damascus Steel company. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride in and out of the pocket, like literally, because of the pocket clip having a ceramic ball going over these, alien ribs. Really cool, though. I mean, absolutely stunning work. And I do love the hyper reflectivity, because this blade is definitely polished more than what you would typically see on a production Damascus Steel knife, right? Damascus Steel knives tend to cost so much more money, right? A cheap edition of Damascus Steel blade on any frame is going to add at least $150. Nowadays, if you ask knives, it's $300 more, right? So it's definitely expensive stuff. Probably not $300 more, but is it a solid $175 to $180 increase over whatever they would normally use, M390? Yes, absolutely, right? But normally we don't see this type of polish. And because of the frame, how they've opened all of this up, it's really cool to see that reflectivity underneath there. Really, really cool. I have no idea how they managed to mill this. I mean, this is just some of the most intricate stuff I've ever seen. The stop, as far as I can tell, is actually the titanium blade housing on the titanium frame, which is another first. I've never seen that before, but it should be okay. I mean, it's not like there's an enormous amount of impact, right? Titanium will work harden, but ironically, that will cause the lock bar to wear faster than it normally would, because instead of what we typically have on the back end, this is still part of this. Typically, we have the steel blade contacting a steel stop pin. We have steel on steel over here, but we got titanium on titanium over here. So as this squishes, right, this lock bar will wear over slightly faster. I don't think that's going to matter, and it will still take a very long time. The impact isn't heavy enough for that to matter. I think the blue accents are actually a really nice touch here. I always love how like where they've written this, it's in cursive. I think that's just really cool. These are numbered, right? They're limited. I don't think this will be the last version of the Rike Alien, obviously. But if they decide to do this in the future, I'd really like to know, right? So maybe they called this Damascus Steel. Maybe they called it that because they thought, well, it's the same process. Like, maybe we can call it that, right? I think maybe, maybe that's the case. Maybe it was just like they just didn't care, thought that nobody would care. So I don't know what the deal was, but I think we should give Rike an opportunity to correct this, right? And learn about whatever it is that they're creating these blades out of. That would be super cool. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Long video, but definitely something we needed to talk about. Thank you again to Rike for sending this in. I do really like this. I think it's neat, and I'm really interested to find out what you guys make in the future. But we got to label things correctly. Trust is a big part of the knife community in general. Like, we've had our fair share of deception, and people don't like it. So it's, we got to be able to trust. We got to be able to trust the companies that are selling us this stuff. Please make sure to follow us. Follow us. I was talking about we as the community, so I was including all of you there. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.